Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Books and Bytes. Today, we're going to be doing a deep dive into Forbidden Nation, A History of Taiwan by Jonathan Manthorpe.
Yeah.
And, it's a history that's way more than just, dates and names.
Oh, it really is. I think what really struck me about this book was how Manthorpe uses Taiwan's history to really explore these huge themes. Cultural identity, geopolitical struggle, that constant kind of push and pull between control and self-determination.
Yeah, and he takes us from, the earliest evidence of human presence on the island all the way to, the complex realities of modern-day Taiwan.
Right.
Showing how all those things are kind of woven together.
Yeah, and you really start to see how those themes play out again and again in different eras in different ways.
Yeah.
And I think it's that makes it more than just a history book. It gives you a framework for understanding Taiwan's place in the world today and, even how it might navigate the future.
So where does he actually begin this journey?
Well, he takes us back thousands of years to a time when Taiwan was actually connected to mainland China during the last ice age. And there is some evidence of human habitation even then, but the real story begins with the arrival of Austronesian tribes, who likely used Taiwan as a jumping-off point for migrations across the Pacific. So you can kind of imagine Taiwan as this ancient hub of seafaring exploration.
Wow, I never knew that Taiwan played a role in those migrations.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the ancestors of, today's indigenous Taiwanese population?
Exactly. These early settlers would give rise to the diverse indigenous cultures that still exist in Taiwan today, although their history is marked by tragic displacement and marginalization, as we'll see.
He doesn't gloss over that.
No, not at all. He's very clear-eyed about the injustices faced by indigenous people throughout Taiwan's history. But to understand how those injustices came about, we need to move forward in time to the arrival of the first outsiders, the Europeans.
Okay, so we're talking about, those intrepid European adventurers setting sail for uncharted territories. Who gets there first?
Well, Manthorpe suggests that the Portuguese might have been the first Europeans to sight Taiwan, giving it the name Formosa, beautiful island. But it was the Dutch East India Company that really established a foothold there in the early 17th century. They saw Taiwan as a strategic trading post, a link in their vast network across Asia.
So this is where that theme of, outside forces seeking to control Taiwan really starts to take shape.
Absolutely. The Dutch weren't there for cultural exchange. They were there for profit and power. And this led to clashes with not only the indigenous population, but also a very intriguing figure, Li Tan, better known as Captain China.
Okay, now that's a name that piques my interest. What's his story?
Li Tan was a Chinese merchant who turned to piracy, commanding a multinational fleet of Chinese and Japanese outlaws. And he envisioned Taiwan as a kind of independent pirate kingdom, free from both Chinese and European control. He even established a base on the island, challenging the Dutch for dominance.
So a pirate king with dreams of an independent Taiwan. Sounds like the plot of a movie.
It really does. And while Li Tan's vision didn't ultimately come to fruition, his story reveals that this desire for self-determination, for Taiwan to chart its own course, was already present, even in those early days.
It's amazing how he picks up on those subtle threads and connects them to these larger themes that run throughout the book.
He's a master at that.
Yeah.
And speaking of figures who embody that spirit of self-determination, we can't forget about Koxinga, Cheng Qilong, the Ming loyalist who became a legend in Taiwan.
Yeah. Koxinga's story is one of the most dramatic episodes in the book.
Absolutely. Imagine this. China has fallen to the Manchu invaders. The Ming dynasty is crumbling. And Koxinga, this brilliant military strategist, escapes to Taiwan with his loyal followers. He sees the island as a base from which to resist the Qing dynasty and ultimately restore the Ming.
Right. And then there's that incredible siege of Fort Zeelandia, where he drives out the Dutch in a display of military cunning and sheer determination. I mean, it's the kind of scene that makes history come alive. You can almost picture it.
You can practically feel the tension in Manthorpe's description. And that victory, expelling a European colonial power, cemented Koxinga's status as a hero in Taiwan, a symbol of resistance against outside control. He even becomes deified in popular culture, revered as the sage king who opened up Taiwan.
So Koxinga establishes the Qing dynasty on Taiwan, this beacon of hope for those opposed to the new Qing rulers in China, but it's a fragile hope.
It is. Despite their best efforts, the Qing dynasty eventually falls to the king. And Manthorpe describes how the king, initially wary of Taiwan, gradually came to see the island's strategic importance and sought to exert their control.
Right.
It's a familiar pattern, right? Another outside power imposing its will on Taiwan.
And how did the people of Taiwan react to this new wave of control? Was there any pushback?
Oh, absolutely. Manthorpe details numerous uprisings and rebellions against Qing rule, often led by secret societies like the Sanho Hui, who tapped into that deep-seated desire for autonomy. But the Qing were determined to consolidate their hold on the island. They implemented policies to control immigration, limit development, and even attempted to segregate Chinese settlers from the indigenous population through the mountain sealing order, which, as you can imagine, only created further tension and resentment.
So it sounds like the king's rule was marked by constant friction and this struggle for control, both within Taiwan and between the island and the mainland.
Exactly. And that struggle would only intensify as a new player emerged on the scene, one that would have a profound impact on Taiwan's destiny: Japan.
Okay, so we're talking about the late 19th century, a time when Japan was rapidly modernizing and flexing its imperial muscles. How does Taiwan fit into this new power dynamic?
Well, Taiwan, with its strategic location and resources, became a prime target for Japan's ambitions. And Manthorpe takes us through the events leading up to the island's annexation by Japan in 1895, a moment that would usher in a new era of both progress and oppression for the Taiwanese people.
Right, and it seems like that's been a recurring theme in Taiwan's history. This constant tension between progress and oppression, self-determination and external control. It makes you wonder how the Taiwanese people managed to preserve their identity amidst such tumultuous circumstances.
You're absolutely right. And that's where Manthorpe's exploration of cultural identity becomes really fascinating. He doesn't just focus on the political and economic aspects, but delves into how Taiwanese culture adapted and evolved under these various influences, creating a unique blend of Chinese heritage, indigenous traditions, and even elements absorbed from the Dutch and Japanese periods.
It sounds like Taiwan's identity is this complex tapestry, woven together by both internal and external forces. But I'm curious to learn more about how that identity is expressed, how it manifests in the daily lives of the Taiwanese people.
Well, that's where we move into the next chapter of Manthorpe's story, exploring the impact of Japanese rule on Taiwanese society and culture. It's a complex period, marked by both modernization and oppression, but one that ultimately lays the groundwork for modern-day Taiwan.
Okay, this is getting really interesting. So next time we'll delve into that Japanese colonial period and explore how it shapes Taiwan's identity and sets the stage for the island's remarkable transformation in the 20th century.
When the Japanese took over, they had this vision of turning Taiwan into kind of a model colony, a showcase for their modernization efforts. So this meant massive investments in infrastructure, railroads, harbors, communication networks, all aimed at integrating Taiwan into the Japanese empire.
So it sounds like a period of rapid change and development, almost like a forced march into modernity. But I imagine this wasn't just about altruism on Japan's part. What were they hoping to gain from all of this?
Well, it was definitely a two-way street. The Japanese saw Taiwan as a source of raw materials and agricultural products to fuel their own growing economy, as well as a strategic outpost in the region. But to achieve that, they needed a stable and productive colony, so they implemented these ambitious programs in education, healthcare, and public administration. And Manthorpe even argues that this period laid the foundation for Taiwan's later economic success.
It's fascinating how sometimes even periods of oppression can inadvertently create conditions for future growth.
Oh.
But how did the Taiwanese people experience this transformation? Was there any room for resistance or cultural preservation?
Manthorpe doesn't shy away from the harsh realities of Japanese rule. He describes a system of forced assimilation, where Taiwanese people were pressured to adopt Japanese language and customs, often facing discrimination and violence if they resisted. There were restrictions on freedom of speech, assembly, and even religious practices. It's a stark reminder that progress often comes at a cost, especially for those who are subject to colonial rule.
You can really see that theme of control versus self-determination playing out again. But even under such oppressive conditions, did any form of Taiwanese identity manage to survive?
Absolutely. Manthorpe highlights how Taiwanese intellectuals, artists, and activists found subtle ways to resist assimilation and express their cultural identity. They formed literary societies, published underground newspapers, and even incorporated elements of traditional Taiwanese music and theater into their work. It's a testament to the resilience of culture, even in the face of tremendous pressure to conform.
It's amazing how even the smallest acts of defiance can become a form of resistance. And this period also saw the emergence of figures who would go on to play pivotal roles in Taiwan's later struggle for democracy, didn't it?
Yes, Manthorpe introduces us to figures like Lin Xiantang, who advocated for greater autonomy for Taiwan within the Japanese Empire. He argued that Taiwan should have its own elected assembly and be allowed to develop its own distinct cultural and political institutions. These were radical ideas at the time, but they planted the seeds for a future where Taiwan could govern itself.
So even within the context of colonial rule, there were those who dared to envision a different future for Taiwan. But of course, the Japanese Empire wouldn't last forever. How does Manthorpe portray the end of Japanese rule and the return of Taiwan to Chinese control?
Well, as World War II came to an end, Taiwan found itself caught in the crosscurrents of this new geopolitical order. The Japanese Empire was defeated, and the island was handed back to China, now under the control of Chiang Kai-shek and the Kuomintang. And it was a moment of both hope and trepidation for the Taiwanese people, many of whom had grown accustomed to a degree of autonomy under Japanese rule.
It's almost as if Taiwan was constantly being handed from one powerful entity to another, never quite able to chart its own course. But this time the transition wasn't smooth, was it? There's that infamous incident, the 228 incident, that Manthorpe describes in chilling detail.
Yes, that event is a dark stain on Taiwan's history. Manthorpe doesn't hold back in recounting the brutal crackdown on a peaceful protest in 1947, which sparked widespread unrest and led to a period of brutal repression known as the White Terror. Thousands of Taiwanese people were imprisoned, tortured, or executed, often on flimsy charges of being communist sympathizers or challenging the Kuomintang's authority.
It's a stark reminder of how fragile freedom can be, especially in times of political turmoil. And it also seems like a betrayal of the hope that many Taiwanese people felt upon returning to Chinese control.
Absolutely. Manthorpe argues that the 228 incident had a profound impact on Taiwanese society, creating deep-seated mistrust of the Kuomintang and fueling the desire for self-determination. It's a wound that took decades to heal, and its legacy continues to shape Taiwan's political landscape to this day.
So even as Taiwan entered a new era, those themes of control resistance and the search for identity continued to play out, often in tragic ways. But amidst the darkness, did any glimmer of hope emerge during this period?
Well, Manthorpe points to a figure who would eventually play a key role in Taiwan's transition to democracy. Chiang Ching-kuo, Chiang Kai-shek's son. He's a complex figure, someone who participated in the repression of the White Terror, but later came to recognize the need for political reform.
It sounds like a classic story of redemption. A son trying to reconcile with the legacy of his father while also charting a new course for his people. But how did this shift in thinking come about? What led Chiang Ching-kuo to embrace democratic principles?
Manthorpe suggests that several factors were at play. There was growing pressure from within Taiwanese society for greater freedom and political participation. The international context was also shifting, with the U.S. Taiwan's main ally increasingly emphasizing democratic values. And perhaps most importantly, Chiang Ching-kuo himself seemed to undergo a genuine change of heart, recognizing that Taiwan's long-term stability and prosperity depended on embracing democracy.
It's amazing how sometimes even the most hardened authoritarian figures can evolve and recognize the power of democratic ideals. But how did this transition actually unfold? What were some of the key steps that led to the emergence of a democratic Taiwan?
Well, Manthorpe takes us through those steps, starting with the lifting of martial law in 1987. A momentous decision that paved a way for the formation of new political parties and allowed for greater freedom of expression and assembly. Then there were the first democratic elections, which saw the Kuomintang, once the sole ruling party, gradually cede power to a more diverse political landscape.
It sounds like a slow and deliberate process, a gradual opening up of the political system. But this newfound freedom must have also created new challenges, especially in relation to mainland China. How did Beijing react to Taiwan's embrace of democracy?
Well, as you can imagine, it wasn't met with enthusiasm. Mainland China has always considered Taiwan to be a breakaway province, an integral part of its territory that must eventually be reunified. And Taiwan's move toward democracy, its assertion of a distinct identity, was seen as a direct challenge to that claim.
So even as Taiwan achieved democratic freedom, it still found itself facing that familiar tension, that struggle for self-determination in the face of pressure from a powerful external force. But this time, it was playing out on a new battlefield, the realm of international diplomacy and the struggle for global recognition. And this is where Manthorpe's exploration of the One China principle becomes especially relevant, isn't it?
Absolutely. The One China principle is a complex and often ambiguous concept that has been used by both Beijing and Taipei to advance their own agendas. And Manthorpe carefully unpacks its different interpretations, showing how it has become a source of tension and a potential flashpoint in cross-strait relations.
It sounds like the One China principle is less a clear-cut policy and more like a diplomatic chess match. with both sides trying to maneuver for advantage. But how has Taiwan managed to navigate this complex situation? What strategies has it employed to maintain its de facto independence in the face of pressure from Beijing?
Well, Manthorpe highlights the importance of Taiwan's relationship with the United States, which has played a crucial role in deterring any aggressive moves from mainland China. The U.S. has maintained a policy of strategic ambiguity, providing Taiwan with military support and diplomatic backing, while also avoiding any actions that could provoke a direct confrontation with Beijing.
So it's a delicate balancing act, trying to maintain close ties with a superpower, while also asserting its own independence and forging its own path. But it sounds like Taiwan's success in navigating this situation has also depended on factors beyond just military might and diplomatic alliances.
That's right. Manthorpe emphasizes the role of Taiwan's vibrant democracy, its economic achievements, and its cultural distinctiveness in garnering international support, and solidifying its position as a beacon of freedom and innovation in the region. It's a testament to the power of soft power, the idea that a nation's influence can stem not just from its military strength, but also from its values, its culture, and its ability to inspire others.
It's a powerful reminder that true strength often lies in those intangible qualities, in the spirit of a people and their determination to build a better future for themselves. But even with all of these factors working in its favor, Taiwan's future remains uncertain, doesn't it? The shadow of mainland China's ambitions still looms large.
That's the reality of the situation. Manthorpe doesn't sugarcoat the challenges Taiwan faces. He acknowledges the growing economic and military power of China, the increasingly assertive posture of its leadership, and the potential for conflict if cross-strait relations deteriorate. But he also highlights the resilience of the Taiwanese people, their determination to preserve their way of life, and their ability to adapt and innovate in the face of adversity.
It sounds like Taiwan's history is a testament to the human spirit, a story of perseverance and the enduring quest for self-determination. But I'm curious to hear more about Manthorpe's insights into the present and future of this forbidden nation. What are some of the key themes and takeaways that emerge from his analysis?
Well, Manthorpe argues that Taiwan's future will depend on its ability to continue navigating the complex geopolitical landscape of the 21st century. He emphasizes the importance of maintaining strong international partnerships, fostering economic growth and innovation, and preserving the island's democratic institutions and cultural vibrancy.
It sounds like a daunting task, a balancing act that requires both strength and finesse.
Mm.
But I'm also curious about how Manthorpe portrays the internal dynamics within Taiwan itself. How does he see the evolving sense of Taiwanese identity and its role in shaping the island's future?
That's where Manthorpe's analysis gets really interesting. He delves into the ongoing debate within Taiwanese society about the island's relationship with mainland China, exploring the spectrum of viewpoints from those who advocate for full independence to those who favor some form of eventual reunification. He highlights the complexities of this debate, showing how it is shaped by historical legacies, cultural affinities, economic interests, and political ideologies.
It sounds like Taiwan's internal dialogue is just as multifaceted and dynamic as its external relations. But I'm wondering if Manthorpe offers any insights into how this debate might be resolved, or what factors might influence its outcome.
Well, he doesn't provide any easy answers or predictions. He recognizes the inherent unpredictability of political events and the role of unforeseen circumstances in shaping the course of history. But he does suggest that Taiwan's future will ultimately be determined by the choices its people make, by their willingness to engage in thoughtful dialogue, to compromise, and to find solutions that address the needs and aspirations of all segments of society.
It's a message of hope, isn't it? A reminder that even in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges, human agency still matters, that we have the power to shape our own destiny. But I'm also curious about how Manthorpe concludes his exploration of this forbidden nation. What are some of the lingering questions he leaves us with?
Well, he ends by urging us to grapple with a fundamental question. If Taiwan has demonstrated its capacity for self-governance, its commitment to democratic values, and its contributions to the global community, what obligations do other nations have to support its right to self-determination? It's a question that goes beyond simple geopolitical calculations and touches upon the core principles of human rights, freedom, and the right of a people to choose their own destiny.
That's a powerful question to leave us with. It encourages us to consider the moral implications of Taiwan's situation and to reflect on our own roles as citizens of a global community. But before we delve into those broader questions, I'd like to take a closer look at some of the specific passages and anecdotes that Manthorpe uses to bring Taiwan's history to life.
That's a great idea. Manthorpe has a knack for weaving in vivid details and personal stories that make the past feel immediate and relevant. I'm particularly fond of his description of.
Oh, yeah. One of the things that I really enjoyed about this book was all these larger-than-life
Yeah.
figures who've left their mark on the island's history. It's really a story filled with those.
Yeah, and Manthorpe does a fantastic job of bringing them to life, doesn't he? He goes beyond just listing their accomplishments and gives us a glimpse into their personalities, their motivations, even their flaws.
Yeah, like take Koxinga, for example.
Mhm.
I mean, we talked about his military prowess and his drive to resist the Qing dynasty. But Manthorpe also highlights his complex personality, his multilingual skills,
Mhm.
his conversion to Christianity. It paints a much more nuanced picture of this almost mythical figure.
Right, and it makes you realize that, even these historical giants were real people grappling with real dilemmas. Another figure who comes to mind is George Salmanazar, this 18th century European who concocted these outlandish tales about Taiwan, claiming that Formosans practiced cannibalism and all sorts of bizarre
Oh,
rituals.
yeah, that was a wild story. It's almost unbelievable that people actually fell for his fabrications.
I know. It's a testament to the power of storytelling and how easily misinformation can spread even back then. But what's interesting is that Salmanazar's deception, while absurd, also reflects a certain fascination with Taiwan, this desire to understand this forbidden nation, even if it meant resorting to invention.
It shows how Taiwan, even in its relative isolation, had this allure for the outside world, this sense of mystery that sparked curiosity. And in Salmanazar's case, a rather elaborate hoax.
Exactly. And those themes of fascination and misunderstanding continue to play out in Taiwan's interactions with the world, especially when it comes to the complexities of the One China principle.
Right, and that's a concept that Manthorpe really dives into, showing how it's been interpreted and manipulated by different actors to serve their own political agendas.
Yeah, he does a really good job of explaining how the principle has been used by both Beijing and Taipei to assert their claims over Taiwan, leading to this ongoing diplomatic tug of war that has implications for global politics.
Yeah, it's one of those concepts that can seem really abstract and confusing, but he breaks it down in a way that makes it understandable and relevant to, the average reader.
Right. He does a great job of connecting those abstract concepts to real-world events, like the 1996 Taiwan Strait Crisis when China attempted to influence Taiwan's first democratic election with missile tests. It shows how these seemingly academic debates can have very real and dangerous consequences.
Yeah, it's a reminder that Taiwan's history is not just a collection of stories from the past,
Mm.
but a living narrative that continues to unfold with implications for the present and the future. But as we've seen, it's also a story of resilience, of people who face numerous challenges and yet manage to forge a unique identity and a thriving democracy.
Absolutely, and that's what makes Forbidden Nation such a compelling read. It's not just this dry historical account, but a story of human struggle, adaptation, and the enduring quest for self-determination. And it leaves you with a sense of awe at the resilience of the Taiwanese people and a deeper understanding of the complex forces that continue to shape their destiny.
Yeah, it's a reminder that even in a world dominated by superpowers and geopolitical maneuvering, that the choices of individuals and the spirit of a nation can make a profound difference.
Absolutely. And it challenges us to think critically about our own roles in supporting those who strive for freedom and autonomy in the face of oppression.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground in our deep dive into Forbidden Nation.
Hmm.
We've explored the historical forces that have shaped Taiwan, the complexities of its identity, and the ongoing challenges it faces in a world where its right to self-determination is constantly being tested.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating journey, and I hope our listeners have gained a deeper appreciation for the rich and often turbulent history of this forbidden nation.
And as always, we encourage you to continue the exploration on your own. Pick up a copy of Forbidden Nation, delve deeper into the stories we've discussed, and form your own opinions about the events that have shaped Taiwan and the choices that lie ahead for its people.
Learning is a continuous process, and we're all in this together.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Jonathan Manthorpe's Forbidden Nation, the history of Taiwan. We hope you've enjoyed the journey as much as we have.
It's been a pleasure exploring this fascinating topic with you.
Until next time, happy reading.